The Genius Club with Prairie Pine. Chapter 72. The Disturbance. August 28, 2006-24. It was still the exact same day as before. The time in the dream hadn't shifted even a minute, but everything else in that surreal world had transformed. Every single detail, every familiar sight had changed beyond recognition. Wait a minute. Alex propped one hand against the moss-covered, muddy brick wall beside him and pressed the other firmly to his forehead, his brows furrowed in deep thought. The butterfly effect of time and space. It was staring him right in the face, impossible to ignore. The dream had undergone yet another abrupt space-time shift, twisting reality into something new. But what had triggered this shift? What was the source of the change, the unshakable anchor? And when exactly had that fateful butterfly flapped its wings to set everything in motion? Alex opened his eyes slowly, his mind racing, as he recalled the news he'd glimpsed before going to bed the previous night. East University was in the process of receiving and organizing Ethan's research materials and all his unfinished scientific papers. Later, the university planned to follow Ethan's last wish and publish those materials to the entire world. Maybe that's the reason, he murmured softly to himself, his rapid heartbeat gradually calming down as the sense of security he'd lost began to seep back into his bones. This was still his dream, that much he was certain of. He hadn't checked the news that day, but judging by the chaotic, altered world around him, East University must have already published Ethan's long-hidden research materials. No, that's not right. Even if they hadn't officially published them yet, the moment an official organization stepped in and took control of Ethan's research materials, it became an irreversible anchor in time. Official organizations are massive and unyielding. Publishing the materials according to Ethan's final wishes was just a matter of time. If no official group had intervened, Ethan's research would have been left gathering dust in his laboratory, his papers unfinished and forgotten. Those unbacked originals could have been sabotaged, destroyed, or altered. There would still have been room to fix things, to reverse the tide. Either way, the space-time butterfly had flapped its wings with all its might, and the irreversible shift had already happened. It was as if the butterfly's wings had flapped so forcefully they'd stirred up clouds of smoke, sending hundreds of thousands of tornadoes swirling through time to twist the world 600 years in the future into an entirely unrecognizable shape. Logically, that made perfect sense in terms of space-time mechanics. But the problem gnawing at him, why has the technological level of the future world regressed instead of advancing? Alex glanced left and right, his confusion deepening. No matter how he looked at it, the technological, economic, and living standards in this altered future were far too backward. In his previous dream, the world had been backward too, but not drastically different from the 2023 he knew. At the very least, it had still been a modern city. But the scene before him now, even the remote village where his grandfather had lived as a child, had been more developed than this. That village, at the very least, had proper dirt roads that could accommodate small vehicles. But these narrow, winding stone paths here, not only could cars not pass through them, but even riding a bicycle would have bent the frame or gotten stuck in the crack. He turned his gaze toward the dimly lit interior of the convenience store nearby. Almost everything inside was wrapped in tattered, yellowed oil paper. Old tungsten light bulbs, chipped thermos liners, frayed shoelaces, shoddily made hardware, garishly colored shampoo bottles, and various snacks that looked stale and inedible. What on earth was going on here? It was clearly the year 2624. How could the living conditions be almost identical to those of the 1980s and 1990s? If Ethan's papers had been published and the dream world had changed drastically, with starships, advanced cannons, space elevators, or other futuristic marvels, Alex wouldn't have been surprised at all. That would have made perfect sense. Ethan himself had even once said that once the hibernation pod was successfully launched, the entire world pattern might be rewritten. Human technology would surely enter an era of explosive rapid development, and the future would be boundless. But rapid development, how could it have gone so drastically backward? Alex couldn't convince himself, couldn't bring himself to accept the bizarre reality unfolding before his eyes. Even if, after Ethan's papers were published, the technological level of the future world had remained stagnant, and he had still been born in that familiar square, he could have accepted it. But instead, after this one single paper was published, technology had regressed by decades, if not more. What on earth happened in these 600 years to make everything fall apart like this? Inside the small convenience store, the old man wearing a thin undershirt stopped fanning himself with his palm leaf fan, his eyes turning to the tall, confused man standing at the door, and asked in a gruff voice, "What's wrong, young man? Do you want to buy something from me?" No. Alex waved his hand quickly, trying to look calm despite his inner turmoil. "Uncle, I wanted to ask you a few questions about this place." Clang! Just as the words left his mouth, a man dressed in all black, his face hidden under a black hat, suddenly rushed out from behind Alex. He moved with startling speed. He knocked over the rickety shelf outside the store, reached out to grab the cash box on the glass counter, and spun around to run. "Hey, stop right there." The old man immediately jumped up from his stool, grabbed the thief's arm tightly, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Put it down! Put the cash box down!" The thief reacted violently, kicking the old man hard in the stomach, sending him crashing into the side of the glass counter, his face twisting in pain. The old man pointed weakly at the fleeing thief, his eyes turning to Alex, and gasped for breath. "Young man, please help me. Catch him. He stole my money." Okay, I'll get him." Alex turned around without hesitation, activating all the parkour skills had honed over the years, and chased after the black-clad figure as it disappeared into the dark night. He had a lot of questions to ask the old man anyway, and helping him get the cash box back would make it easier to strike up a conversation. The thief was clearly very familiar with every nook and cranny of this area. He turned left and right, moving as if walking on flat ground along the rough, uneven stone paths, jumping over gaps and obstacles to try to lose Alex in the darkness. But Alex was no slouch. His parkour skills, honed through years of practice and dedication, had never been neglected. He kicked off the walls, jumped over small ditches, made a few sharp turns, and caught up to the thief in no time at all. "Take this," Alex shouted as he launched a flying kick, slamming into the thief's back. The thief let out a cry of pain and fell to the ground. Alex quickly jumped on top of him, pressing him firmly against the dirt, snatched the cash box from his hand, and set it safely aside. He was about to tie the thief up with a strip of cloth from his jacket when, sizzle, the sharp, sickening sound of a knife piercing flesh rang out. Alex's vision turned red as he looked down at his chest. The thief had a small dagger hidden at his waist, and it was now deeply embedded in his heart. It was driven in so far that only the handle remained visible. Thump! As the thief roughly pulled the dagger out, the immense blood pressure forced hot blood to gush from the wound, splattering onto the ground far away. Alex felt dizzy and lightheaded, his body growing weak as he tried to stand up. But the thief roared in anger. "Damn it, mind your own business. Why do you have to mind your own business?" Sizzle! 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 The thief stabbed again and again, each strike precise and ruthless, stabbing Alex in his vital points, slashing at his neck, then his head, each blow more vicious than the last. Whoosh! Alex suddenly jumped up from his bedroom bed, his chest heaving as he gasped for air, his hand clutching his chest tightly as if he could still feel the pain of the dagger. His heart was pounding wildly, refusing to slow down no matter how hard he tried to calm himself. He gritted his teeth, reached for the lamp on his nightstand, and pressed the switch. Click. The warm light filled the room, chasing away the lingering terror of the dream. But the image of the thief's dagger and the gushing blood still lingered in his mind. In a quiet lakeside villa on the outskirts of East Sea City, the huge crystal chandelier in the spacious living room flickered to life, bathing the entire room in a bright, warm glow. "Since you're home, you should at least turn on the lights instead of sitting in the dark," a dry voice echoed through the room. A dry, wrinkled hand moved away from the light switch, its owner closing the front door gently before walking into the living room. He looked at the fair young man squatting among the messy piles of books on the floor. "How many times have I told you, reading in the dark is bad for your eyes? You're already nearsighted enough as it is. Or do you think reading by moonlight is some kind of cool trick? I think you're well past that childish phase, Lynn." Lynn was completely focused on the task at hand, not saying a single word in response. He rolled up the math magazine in his hand with one hand, held a sharp pencil with the other, and quickly scribbled numbers on the back page of the magazine. "Woo!" he finished in record time, threw the magazine aside without a second glance, and picked up the February issue of the math magazine lying next to him. The old man walked over slowly and picked up the discarded magazine from the floor. It was the January 2022 issue of the math magazine. Since the villa had been unoccupied for a long time, the subscribed magazines and newspapers had piled up neatly in the corner of the living room, gathering a thin layer of dust. The old man flipped to the page where Lynn had just written. It was a Sudoku puzzle, an extremely difficult mathematical game that tested even the sharpest minds. The Sudoku grid was a Ninix 9 square, divided into 9 smaller 3x3 subgrid. Given certain known numbers and specific solving conditions in these 81 small grids, one had to use strict logic and quick reasoning to fill in the numbers 1-9 in the remaining grids. Each number 1-9 had to appear exactly once in each row, each column, and each small subgrid. It was a game that tested both intelligence and mental computing power. Even world-class Sudoku masters needed at least 3 to 4 minutes to solve such a high-difficulty puzzle. Whoosh! Lynn threw the February issue across the room toward the old man. The old man looked down at the magazine. The back page of this February issue also featured an irregular, even more challenging, high-difficulty Sudoku. But in the short time it had taken him to pick up the first magazine and flip through its pages, Lynn had already finished solving the second one. He looked up again, and by the faint moonlight streaming through the window, Lynn had already picked up the March issue of the math magazine, flipped to the back page, and started a new Sudoku. Even if you hadn't come to Ethan Hughes' memorial service this time, I would have called you all the way to East Sea City. The old man seemed completely accustomed to Lynn's silence, not minding at all as he talked to himself. Ethan Hughes. He never should have died. His life was cut short for no reason. If he shouldn't have died, why did he? Lynn's pencil scratched softly across the magazine page, his eyes still fixed on the Sudoku as he finally replied in a soft, indifferent voice. Because someone killed him. Someone deliberately took his life. The old man gritted his teeth, his voice growing hoarse with anger and grief. I know Ethan Hughes too well. He was a kind, good man, but his talent in research was really lacking. Not to mention one Ethan Hughes, even 10,000 Ethan Hughes working together. He would never have been able to develop the hibernation pod-filling fluid in his entire lifetime. So, Lynn blinked his half-open eyes slowly. Through the March issue of the math magazine on the floor, the Sudoku inside was finished in one smooth go, with no erasures or corrections at all. So someone is secretly sabotaging things, changing the course of history right under our noses. The old man pulled a rolled-up stack of lists from his pocket and threw it roughly toward Lynn. I suspect someone is disturbing the natural flow of history, altering the past to change the present.